Welcome back, traveler. You have arrived just in time. Tonight, we're exploring one of the oldest and most mysterious and strange of all the traditional celebrations in Celtic tradition, Samhain. This holiday isn't just some precursor to Halloween, though over time the different elements of these various holidays that happen during fall festivals do tend to meld together. No, Samhain was a celebration all its own. It is a sacred time that marks the turning of the year, a celebration of harvest. And it has been said, also during this time of year, that the veil between the other world and our world is gossamer thin. And if the old stories are to be believed, ancient spirits also roam about during this time. So grab a drink, settle in. This will be everything that you need to know to celebrate Samhain the way we do here in the tavern. Now, most people think of Samhain as falling on October the 31st, the day before All Saints' Day, in conjunction with Halloween. However, our ancestors didn't follow the rigid Gregorian calendar that we do today. You see, for them, Samhain was more of a fluid time of year. It followed the lunar cycles and was meant to have the harvest at the most ideal time in the most ideal weather every single year. It is what is referred to as a cross-quarter day, halfway between the autumn equinox, Mabon, and the winter solstice, Yule. Scholars suggest that the true date of Samhain was marked by the full moon, the one that occurred nearest the midpoint between Mabon and Yule, which means that every year the festival occurred at a different time, sort of ebbing and flowing like the tides. And in ancient times, it wasn't just a single night, it was a many-day revelry. My own clan celebrating between October the 25th and November the 2nd, with what we call Samhain dedications, which is where we do a torch lighting, taking place anywhere between October the 25th and the beginning point of Yuletide. And these festivals are filled with feasting, a convergence of clans and families, and a large day of remembrance, as this is a day when we speak to our ancestors, not necessarily in a spiritual or religious way, but in a calling back to those who came before us to let them know that we're all right, and that we're all doing okay, and perhaps even introduce them to some of the new family members. But more than anything, Samhain was about embracing death. As often and throughout the rest of the year, we tend to hide from it, while simultaneously making space for rebirth. And there are many pagan groups today who let the festival flow far beyond just Halloween night. However, the festival itself was never really a religious or even spiritual rite. It was always about harvest, tradition, and community. And while it has definitely been co-opted by multiple religious groups over the last couple hundred years, the festival itself was always a harvest festival, one that was enjoyed and participated in, not just by those who believed in the spirituality of the sentiment, but also, and most likely more in total, those who simply wanted to celebrate the harvest and recognize and celebrate those who they had lost and those who had just been born. Now, on the more spiritual side of Samhain is sort of a liminal space. It exists somewhere in between. It represents the end of the harvest while also representing the beginning of the darker half of the year. And during this time, the veil between the other world, the land of the Aish, the ancestors, the Tuatha Dé Danann, it thins and they are allowed to pass back through. Now, we have some family stories about this that I'm going to share a little bit later on. But the most important aspect is the reason why the veil thins is because a massive battle took place during this time of year, between the Fomorians and the Tuatha Dé, and the power of nature clashing against nature was so great that it left an eternal scar on time and space. And it is said that on Samhain night, spirits both beloved and mighty, fearsome and gentle, they walk among us. The dead could return to visit their kin, but not all spirits that crossed over were welcome guests. We'll talk about one of the wardens of Samhain who has a dual job, and dual even sort of makes it into his name. And the people knew this. The ancient folk, they knew that this was a possibility. The superstition, while it only registers for the last 600 or 700 years, many people do believe, and my family certainly recognize stories that go back a good deal further than the medieval period. So they would light bonfires atop the hill as they brought in the harvest, and they moved cattle from one field to another. The flames would ward off evil entities and attract the spirits of our beloved family, friends, and kin. Offerings would be left, bread, apple, ale, and seats would be placed for those who had passed on, so that they could join, check on their family, and then move on. And there would be other seats placed for those who might not be invited, so they too could enjoy the feast and also move on without bothering the living. It has been said that there is no greater love than a feasting table, where seats are intentionally left empty for those who are no longer with us. And in modern celebrations, many folk, they will light candles and small fires in remembrance of those who have passed, setting out photos of loved ones along with some of their favorite foods. And this is a tradition that sort of transcends culture. We see this in Dias de las Muertes, we see this in certain Asian cultures, we even see this in certain types of religion. It is a tradition that has transcended the simple act of spirituality and become a common human experience almost all across the world. And one of my favorite aspects of it is during this time, my family, we share stories of those who have passed, stories of the year that has just passed. And it is an absolutely beautiful thing to believe that those who are no longer with us can hear the tales of their past glories and the tales of your present glories and be comforted by it, even in the afterlife. But if for nothing else, it keeps their memory alive. And that's enough for me. And then come the disguises. Why do we dress up for Halloween and Samhain? Well, it's a culmination of many traditions that have sort of danced around and transcended even the seasons to a certain degree. In old Celtic traditions, they would dress up during Ostara, the festival that takes place around the same time as Easter, and going door to door and collecting treats is something that is done during both Samhain and Ostara. But there is also this belief that Samhain and Halloween are nights when we should have caution. After all, there are mighty ancient spirits that are walking about, and goblins and fairies looking to play tricks of all kinds, steal children, steal food, rot the things that are in your refrigerator, and possibly break your tools, and God forbid, your iPhone. And you'll just have to see if your insurance will really take that as the reason why it's bent in half in the perfect shape of your right buttocks. But to safely move amongst these spirits and tricksters, you have to disguise yourself as one of them. Or at the very least try to confuse them by putting on a Michael Myers mask and making them wonder why you did your makeup so poorly. You see, back in the old days, masks would be made of animal hides, twigs and leaves, and different foliages that could be found and grafted together. And the concept then was simple. If the fairies and the spirits couldn't tell whether you were living or dead, or plant or human, they'd probably just leave you alone for want of having better things to do with their one night off a year. And later, Samhain would begin to blend with some of the more Christian holidays like All Saints' Day, and then later what we would call Halloween, the culmination of All Saints' Day and All Hallows' Eve. And in medieval times, there was a tradition called souling, where children would go door to door and ask for bread or pastries in return for prayers for the dead. And of course, over time, the disguises became less about protection and more about tradition, as many of these festivals and the festivities that they bring with them have over time. A way to mimic and mock, and even master the fears that once gripped us during the night. And of course, today we still carry on the tradition of costumes during Halloween, and while today they may be more silly or whimsical than they were then, donning a disguise is still about connecting to that ancient energy of our ancestors. Or perhaps for some it's just about getting free drinks and candy. I won't judge either way. But regardless, it is about taking the night to escape from the mundane and transgress into the fantastical. You could consider implementing nature elements into your costume this year, though this video is definitely coming out after Halloween and Samhain, but perhaps next year. A fur collar, perhaps, maybe some foliage in your hair, an homage to those early costumes intended to hide you from wandering spirits. Now, I promised earlier a tale about a man who had a dual job during Samhain and Halloween, and some of you may have guessed. I was talking about the tale of the Dullahan, and it would not be Samhain if we did not tell the tale of the Dullahan, the headless rider emerging from the underworld on Samhain night, when the boundaries between the realms are at their weakest. Riding his great black steed, the Dullahan holds his head up high like a glowing lantern of eerie yellow in the night. And wherever his gaze falls, wherever his voice is heard, death is sure to follow. There is a tale of an old chieftain who tried to escape his fate, but a wise woman told him there was no way to escape the ride of the Dullahan. And in his fear he barred his gates, he snuffed out every flame. Yet, as midnight approached, a distant echo of the sound of hooves riding through the forest steadily grew nearer, unstoppable. The Dullahan rode straight to the forest, and by the next morning, the chieftain was found cold and lifeless, locked up in his hole. His face frozen in terror, the doors had to be pried open, and no one truly knew how he died, except his children, who saw his madness, and the old wise woman. There is no lock sturdy enough to bar what comes from the other world. The Dullahan collects the souls, it harbingers the death of great individuals, great leaders, great warriors, but also the Dullahan rounds up souls that are not supposed to have left the other world. It collects them in its chariot and takes them back home, similar to the function of the Wild Hunt, which the Dullahan is said to take part in. But that is a story for another time. The centuries have passed, and the spirit of Samhain endures. Today it wears the mask of Halloween, with children laughing in costumes and pumpkins glowing on steps, and a sense of playful mischief in the air. But beneath all the trappings, the heart of Samhain still beats. Bonfires to ward off darkness, feasts to honor those who came before us, and a quiet acknowledgement that the past is not so far away. We are still connected with those ancient ones and the rhythms of the land, and those unseen forces that shape our lives. So when you carve a jack-o'-lantern or you don a costume, know that you are partaking in something that is ageless. A ritual that reaches back across the centuries, that draws a line directly from your heart to the heart of your ancestors. And there you have it, my friend, the tale of Samhain. A time when the boundaries between life and death blur, when the old ways rise and the spirits walk among us. Whether celebrated as Halloween or one of the more ancient festivals, remember the power of the season, embrace the darkness, honor the past, and beware of what may be lurking in the shadows. And until next time, my friends, may your fires burn bright, may the spirits be kind to you, and may you always stay bloodthirsty. Have a good night, my friends. I'll see you in the next one.